Hello and welcome back. So our next session is on AI captioning, as led by two experienced presenters with strong international backgrounds. We've got Laura Lesmano Wijaya and Zhao A. Ling. Laura is a sign language educator, interpreter, and community leader from Indonesia, and she heads the Sign Language Center in Indonesia, supporting deaf education and interpreter development across 15 branches. Xiao is a sign language interpreter and language coordinator, originally from China, but now based here in Spain, not far from me, and holds a master's in linguistics focused on sign language policy, and has worked with universities, NGOs, and deaf communities internationally. Zhao is especially involved in multilingual and international interpreting. Together, they'll be exploring how AI-generated captions are shaping the work of sign language interpreters and translators, and opening new opportunities for deaf professionals worldwide. This session looks at the blurred boundary between interpreting and accessibility, and how AI-generated captions are now supporting not just deaf audiences, but also deaf interpreters as well. We'll look at what works, what's missing, and what the future may hold as technology evolves alongside our professional practices. Let's welcome Zhao and Laura to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Shao, would you like to start us off? Let's get our slides up on the screen if we could. While we're waiting for the slides to be presented, I will go ahead and introduce ourselves. We've already given a bit of background, but as already explained, I'm Laura Lesmana Wijaya. I come from Indonesia. And I'm really happy to be here at the Together conference with all of you. A bit nervous, but we'll try my best to get through the presentation. Excited to be here again. So again, I'm Laura. I live in Indonesia. I'm currently here right now. It is 8:30 at night for me, so a bit of a time difference. But again, still really thrilled to be here co-presenting with Xiao. And I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, my name is Xiao. This is my sign name. I was born and raised in China and moved to Spain about 2.5 years ago to work in international contexts with different languages, signed and spoken. Laura and I have been working together for some time on international sign and at international sign conferences. I myself am a hearing interpreter with English as a second language. Laura and I have been looking at one interesting aspect, which we'll talk to you about today. As you can see from the title of our presentation, we're going to be looking at AI captioning and how this acts as a digital bridge for sign language interpreters, specifically looking at deaf interpreters and the traditional practices of those professionals. And I know that traditionally we've depended on feed interpreters or human captioners to facilitate their work, particularly in the context of international sign. However, these methods are not always reliable or readily available. So deaf interpreters and second language English users like myself have begun exploring the use of AI-generated captions as an alternative, providing a new foundation for interpretation beyond traditional feeds. So let me give you a little bit of background. So myself as a hearing sign language interpreter with English as an L2 or 3 or 4 or 5, depending on your profile. And Laura is also not a native English user. So we depend a lot on captioning. So when AI started to come out with automatic captioning, we thought, wow, what an interesting subject to try to look into and capitalize on. So first, this slide is just a kind of brief overview of what many of you already know. And sorry if the slide looks a little wonky. So we're doing a lot of remote work, and most of that happens on Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and Google Meet. I think these are the top three out of all the platforms out there. The subtitles or captioning that's provided within each are a a little bit different, right? So first of all, you have the option to maybe move the captions where you want on the screen or not. So that would be the position. You also have the option to increase or decrease the font size, font color, and some interpreters prefer to have specific colors or a specific contrast, which would then lead us into picking the background color of the captions. And this is very important, again, for contrast. You also have the text margin, which is some people call this spacing. So spacing between the lines of captioning. You have options to do this in some of the platforms. Also the window size. Okay, so some platforms will force you to use a kind of long rectangular window. Others, you can make it, a box, and there's also speaker recognition, which then changes some element of the text to let you know the speaker has changed. And so this all should be considered when using these captions to aid in your work as an interpreter, especially for our condition, our case as an international sign interpreter. Okay. Now, Zoom does have some paid options where you can also get translations, automatic translations of the subtitles. Microsoft Teams doesn't have this. Google Meet does have the option, but you can only see one language at a time. And then, sorry, this is not visible on the slide for some reason. A lot of times when we're working, we have Spanish, English, and French presenters, like we have today. We've had different languages presented today, and what we don't have yet is AI that can recognize languages and adjust the language of the captioning without having to put that in the settings. So this is what it looks like in Zooms and Microsoft Teams if you go into settings. So you can see the different aspects of the settings. So you have different colors and backgrounds, font size, height, and so on. And you can also adjust the positioning and size of the window where the captioning appears in your workstation. So every one of us likes to have a different layout, and we'll show you what a typical layout looks like for us, right? So this is an example of, as an interpreter, when we're doing our work, what the screens look like. Okay, so in this example, we're using a split screen. One side of the screen is the Zoom window, and we've put the captions on top that are coming directly from AI in Zoom. And then you can see we have a browser window open on the right side here that will show the captioning, which is human based. So we have a kind of double support here. And I think many of us are quite interested in how this looks in our home semi-professional studios, or what the setup could look like even in person if you wanted to rely on caption support in person.
Yes, so I will do my best. I know the screen's a bit small and hard to see, so I'll do my best to describe the visual here that we have on the slide. And whether you're a deaf or hearing interpreter, this is kind of the ideal situation. And there's two different routes you can take, whether you're working remotely or you're working in person. So the slide here is showing a remote situation. So we would have, same as we do today, actually, where we are now. We have an interpreter working as support interpreter on screen, but everyone is in a remote situation. So you would ideally have two screens. One screen would be the actual Zoom room or the Teams, Google Meets, wherever the actual meeting is taking place. So you would have that on a specific screen. You could use the automated captions or the AI captions that those platforms have available on that Zoom screen. On the next screen, you could then have, if there is human-generated captions, as the previous slide shows, you could also have those as well. You would want the camera placed above the captions. It's just for sight lines and to make sure that you do have the easiest line of sights for yourself while you're working. If you do have the captions too far down, you're having to adjust your sight lines too much and it can be a bit distracting. So it is recommended to have the captions as close to your camera as possible so that it is a bit more of a naturalistic setting and easier for you to have it in your line of sight. And then we also have your support interpreter that you cannot forget about as well. So you need to also have them within your field of vision. So that is what the second screen would be for your support interpreter. So you could also have them and it's all within your main field of vision. It is quite a lot of work, to be honest. It is lots of different screens and needing to have kind of a wider field of vision to keep all of the content as accessible as possible. It's a bit visually busy in these types of settings. Now, this would be if you are working in person with your support interpreter. And if the meeting is still remote, it would be the same situation where you have the two screens, the Zoom meeting on one, and your captioning via a human captioner could be on the other screen. Then you would position yourself in the best spot to have the camera and the captions in your field of vision, and your support interpreter would be there in person with you. The orange figure is the support interpreter, would be off to the side, but again, still within an ideal field of vision for you to see all of the content. And now while we're working, there are different barriers and challenges that we come across. Sometimes we do see that captions might not work, and I will explain a bit more some of these challenges that we do see in these types of environments. So there are lots of pros and cons to working with AI captioning. For hearing interpreters, there's more access as to what environments they can work in. For many deaf interpreters, they do have to go with a support interpreter. It's often viewed as being too much of a financial burden. The cost is higher for deaf interpreters. So AI captioning is one way that deaf interpreters can have more access and have more of an equal playing field with their hearing counterparts within our profession. So it does provide more working opportunities for us as deaf interpreters, where we are able to work individually in situations thanks to the support of AI captioning. So that is one big pro to it. AI captioning is less costly compared to human captioning. And this is not to say that we should do away with human-generated captioning, but for myself, for example, I live in Indonesia. We do not have the economy to be able and the infrastructure to pay and train human captioners. So they're not available to us to begin with, just because of the development of our country. And so for us, in the context of Indonesia, AI captioning is often free or you pay a very minimal amount. It's just far more accessible in specific contexts. So we do have to think about the accessibility and the resources that people have available to them. And so AI captioning is a great way to be able to still have work opportunities and have it fit for a specific country's context. So it works really well in that situation as well. And it does help us have, again, it's not always 100% accurate, but it does create, for both hearing and deaf interpreters to then work together and give us more opportunities to work as teams. With AI captioning, it does also take a little bit of the burden and responsibility off for the support interpreter to make sure every little bit of information is being presented. It can kind of work in conjunction with the AI caption, so it does take some of the work off of the support interpreter, if I'm right with that, Zhao?
Indeed.
And it can help with confidence building. Deaf interpreters are provided more access to work, which then builds more confidence. We then have a larger pool of deaf interpreters that are available to do jobs. And we're all well aware that captioning in the past was not very proficient. There was lots of issues. It had a hard time with certain accents. And as technology improves, we do see AI captioning also improving along with it. And there are some challenges I would also like to demonstrate today as well. In terms of for language gaps, we do see that sometimes there are words that might be missing. The AI captioning system is not able to catch it. So we do see this still happening with AI captioning. It might be a different language that then maybe the main language is English and it shifts to a different language as we showed on the previous slide. So you might need an extra device to then be able to have a captioning system or an AI system on a third device to be able to then switch from different languages, if English or whatever the main language of the conference is. So if English is the main language, but then someone does decide to speak in Spanish, oftentimes the AI captioning system is not able to then interpret and transcribe the Spanish. So you would need to have a separate device with the interpretation available for the Spanish feed. And so for those hearing interpreters that have the audio feed for the live interpreters for spoken language, that works very well. But with AI, it doesn't have those capabilities yet to keep up. And I've had this happen to me in work situations before where the language has switched and I've not had access to the captions. And so I've had to then grab a different device. I've had to use like a live transcription type of system. Some of it wasn't working, it wasn't catching what was being said. So then I had to grab a third device to then have a completely separate transcription to capture the Spanish language. So there still are challenges and difficulties to AI captioning. There's pros and cons to both AI captioning and human generated captioning. So we do see our limitations to both. So for us as interpreters, we have to be really cognizant of all the solutions we need to have available to us in our remote work settings. Another issue with AI generated captioning is it is not often portraying the emotions that people are emoting. If someone is speaking maybe with an angry tone, it's not able to capture that. So I myself, while I'm interpreting, I'm not able to catch the tone. So having a hearing support interpreter that can then feed me those emotions to let me know this person is currently angry or this person is speaking very quickly, just to have the emotions behind the content is also really vital for an accurate interpretation. And that is one limitation that AI does have currently. So this is more from the perspective of a deaf interpreter. In my work as a deaf interpreter, Shao will now explain the perspective of hearing interpreters.
Thanks, Laura, for presenting that in a very clear manner in positioning deaf interpreters and hearing interpreters and looking at the differences when using these types of supports while we're working. So as an L2 English user, I tend to rely on a lot of different types of support. And there are pros and cons of the different types of support that I use. So let's go through some of the pros, and you can see these four elements on the slide. So time is a real important aspect of interpreting, as we all know. So with human generated captions, it kind of depends on the captioner, right? Whether how fast you're getting the captions, how well they're understanding the message. With AI, it's much more fluent. You know the pace and of the captioning that you're going to get, no matter who the speaker is, right? So basically, it helps a lot with reducing lag time due to whatever constraints the captioning is putting on you. So a lot of times when I, as a hearing interpreter, am missing information because the information is coming too fast or because of an accent, I tend to use AI captioning as a backup support. And it's been very, very helpful for me to keep up with the pace of the speaker. And I often see with AI captions that it keeps almost right to the speaker, so there's not really any lag time. So there's flow as well, right? So there's a reduction of prosodic flattening. So if a speaker is using English as an L2, L3, L4 speaker, the way that we can match to their style is to choose specific words like women with disabilities or students from rural areas, right? So a lot of times native English speakers will speak these specific types of noun phrases and de-emphasize these constructions, which means that L2 speakers have a hard time catching the end of a phrase that tends to trail off. And so AI really helps us to be able to catch every word in a sentence that comes from a native speaker. Now let's move to accent neutralization. So AI captioning provides visual confirmation of what the content is, right? Which is especially helpful when interpreting speakers with difficult, unfamiliar accents, right? So this is very valuable for people like myself who are non-native English interpreters. We're trying to catch all of these nuances in real time. So it really is kind of it's a nice backup to support in those ways. And now when we work a lot in contexts about, disabilities, and we're working with another person or with accessible people who use assistive technology, perhaps that device then feeds their speech into Zoom, and the devices for some people who are using these assistive technologies, it sounds very robotic. Okay, so I think the AI captioning helps to sew this, I guess, choppy robotic language into something that seems a bit more fluent. Okay, the third benefit here is that we have some sign languages and some things that we interpret that require a lot of finger spelling, right? So if you have all of the spelling on the screen from AI, that's of course very helpful for anyone. So this is kind of a real-time spelling check. And last, we have instant backup resource, right? So it supports solo interpreters, right? If something happens, you're working a job, and you're working a job on your own and you need support. This is another way to get support in certain instances where we might do that. And it also helps us not only rely on our ears for information, right? So we all, as visual language and visual language interpreters, want to be able to improve our practice using visual means of support. And this helps us become better interpreters in general. Last thought about AI is the trust factor, right? So where is this information going and how might it be used, right? So what is the data protection side of all of this? So these are things to consider in terms of some of the challenges. And I will wrap up that slide. Now, Laura and I have been discussing, and we want certain things from AI captioning in the future. Okay, so this is a bit of a wish list from our side. The first thing that we would like to see is we'd like to see the team interpreter or the support interpreter be able to do a manual override vis-a-vis live editing tools in the AI captioning, right? We also want to have personalized visual settings, but more than what they're giving us now, and a host of other things. We're running out of time, so I'm skipping to the conclusion. These are the four main general things that I would like the audience to take. First of all, AI captioning enhances interpreter workflows across different profiles, right? Especially looking at deaf interpreters and interpreters who have English as an L2 or whatever the majority language is as an L2. AI captioning goes beyond access, okay? So it includes, like I said, DIs and performance support and inclusion. We need better personalization, accuracy, and multilingual support. And we need to look at some ideological shifts as well, going from audio-centric to visually inclusive support solutions. So we don't want interpreters without an audio feed to panic, because there are other things that can help back us up. And please, we're not suggesting that AI captioning replaces a support interpreter or it is going to replace any of our work. It's just an additional tool that we can all use. And obviously, we shouldn't trust AI from the beginning. We also have to take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt. So thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all.